There are people who can hold their breath for 13 minutes. Not trained athletes in swimming pools, not people wearing wetsuits and fins, just people, walking on the ocean floor, hunting fish with wooden spears, 13 minutes underwater without any equipment at all. The Bahau people live in Southeast Asia. They spend most of their lives on and under the water. They dive down 60 feet, sometimes more. They walk along the bottom collecting sea cucumbers. They spear fish. They hold their breath longer than seems possible. Scientists thought this was just practice, years of diving, lungs that adapted. But when they studied the Bahau, they found something else. Their spleens are 50% larger than normal, not from diving, from birth. Bahau babies are born with bigger spleens. Even Bahau people who never dive have them. It's genetic. Written into their DNA. Here's what a spleen does. It stores red blood cells. When you hold your breath, your spleen contracts. It dumps those extra red blood cells into your bloodstream. More red blood cells means more oxygen. More oxygen means you can stay underwater longer. The Bahau have evolved bigger spleens in about 1,000 years. 1,000 years. That's nothing in evolutionary time. That's 50 generations, 50 grandmothers back. You could trace your family tree that far if you had the records. Evolution isn't supposed to work this fast. We learn that it takes millions of years, slow changes, tiny mutations, natural selection grinding away over vast stretches of time. But the Bahau evolved in 1,000 years. They're not the only ones. Tibetans live at high altitude where there's less oxygen. They evolved different hemoglobin, blood that carries oxygen more efficiently. That happened in about 3,000 years. The Inuit eat a diet that's almost entirely fat and protein, very few vegetables. That should cause heart disease. But they evolved genes that process fat differently. Their bodies handle that diet in ways other humans can't. These changes happened fast, faster than we thought possible, and they're still happening, right now, in your lifetime, in your body. Evolution didn't stop. We're not the finished product. We're still changing. Most people think human evolution ended. We built civilization. We have medicine. We control our environment. Natural selection doesn't apply anymore, but that's not how it works. As long as some people have more children than others, evolution continues. As long as genes affect survival and reproduction, natural selection keeps going. We're evolving right now, just in different ways than before. This is what keeps me up at night. Not ancient history, not what happened. What's happening? The fact that we're not done, that the human story isn't finished, that your children's children's children might be as different from you as you are from someone 5,000 years ago. We think of evolution as something that happened to our ancestors, something done. But we're in the middle of it. We're the transition, the in-between stage, and nobody knows what comes next. Scientists discovered this by accident. They were studying the Bahau people, trying to understand how they could dive so long. They took blood samples, measured lung capacity, did all the normal tests. Then someone suggested checking their spleens. The researchers used portable ultrasound machines. They scanned Bahau divers in their boats. They also scanned people from nearby farming villages who never dove. People with similar genetics but different lifestyles. The difference was obvious. Bahau spleens were 50% larger. Not just in divers, in everyone. Even Bahau people who'd never been underwater had bigger spleens than the farmers. This was published in 2018, a study led by Melissa Illardo. She'd been diving with the Bahau for years, watching them work underwater, timing their dives. Some lasted over 10 minutes. One man, she studied regularly, hit 13 minutes. That's not normal. Most people start to panic after 90 seconds. Trained freedivers can reach 5 or 6 minutes, maybe 8 if they're exceptional, but 13 minutes is different. That's not just training. The spleen finding explained it. Here's how it works. Your spleen sits under your ribcage on the left side. It's about the size of your fist. One of its jobs is storing red blood cells, extra ones, a reserve supply. When you hold your breath, your body knows. It triggers something called the dive reflex. Your heart rate slows. Blood vessels in your arms and legs constrict. Blood flows to your core, to your brain and heart, the organs that absolutely need oxygen. And your spleen contracts. It squeezes like a sponge, dumps those stored red blood cells into your bloodstream. More red blood cells means more hemoglobin. More hemoglobin means more oxygen carrying capacity. Your blood can hold more oxygen. You can stay underwater longer. Seals do this. Whales do this. All diving mammals have the reflex. Humans have it too. We just don't use it much. The Bajau use it constantly. And over 1,000 years their spleens grew. But here's what's really interesting. The researchers found a specific gene, PDE10A. It's involved in regulating thyroid hormones. Those hormones affect spleen size. The Bajau have a variant of this gene, a mutation. It's different from the version most humans carry, and this variant seems to trigger larger spleen development. This is natural selection happening fast, really fast. Think about what had to occur. First, someone was born with this mutation. Just random chance. DNA copying itself and making a small mistake. That person had a slightly bigger spleen. They could dive a little longer, catch more fish, feed their family better. Maybe they survived a famine that killed others. Maybe they had more children who survived to adulthood. Those children inherited the gene. They had bigger spleens too. They became better divers, more successful. They had more children. Generation after generation, the mutations spread. People with normal spleens couldn't compete as well. They caught fewer fish, fed fewer children. The gene for bigger spleens became more common. In 1,000 years it became standard. Most Bajau people now carry it. 1,000 years is 50 generations. Your family tree goes back that far in historical time. There are written records from 1,000 years ago. The Norman conquest was 1,000 years ago. Evolution happened in recorded history. Scientists used to think this was impossible. Evolution was supposed to take hundreds of thousands of years. Millions. The textbook said modern humans stopped evolving when we invented agriculture, when we built cities, when we created medicine and controlled our environment. But the Bajau proved that wrong. So did the Tibetans. Tibet sits on a plateau. The average elevation is over 14,000 feet. The air has about 40% less oxygen than at sea level. Most people get altitude sickness up there. Headaches, nausea, exhaustion. Your body struggles to get enough oxygen. Tibetans don't have this problem. They've lived at high altitude for at least 3,000 years, maybe longer. Their bodies adapted. They have different hemoglobin, a variant called EPAS1. It regulates how much hemoglobin your blood produces. At high altitude, most people's bodies panic. They make more and more hemoglobin, trying to carry more oxygen, but too much hemoglobin makes your blood thick. It can cause strokes, heart problems. Tibetans don't do this. Their EPAS1 variant keeps hemoglobin at normal levels. Instead, their blood uses oxygen more efficiently. They don't need more hemoglobin. They just use what they have better. This mutation appeared about 8,000 years ago. It spread through the Tibetan population in 3,000 years. 3,000 years, that's nothing. That's 150 generations. Ancient Egypt lasted longer than that. The Inuit evolved even faster. They live in the Arctic. Their traditional diet is almost entirely meat and fat. Seal, whale, fish. Very few plants. Almost no carbohydrates. This diet would kill most people. All that fat should cause heart disease, clogged arteries, heart attacks. But the Inuit have some of the lowest rates of heart disease in the world. They evolved genes that process fat differently, variants in FADS1 and FADS2. These genes control how your body breaks down fatty acids. The Inuit variants are incredibly rare in other populations, but nearly universal among the Inuit. This happened in about 5,000 years, maybe less. Scientists found these mutations by accident too. They were doing genetic surveys, comparing populations, looking for disease markers. They kept finding these weird variants, genes that shouldn't work the way they do. Then they realized these weren't diseases, these were adaptations, evolution in action. The studies came out between 2010 and 2018, all recent. We've known about this for less than 15 years. It changed everything we thought about human evolution. We're not done, we're not finished, we're still changing. Right now, in ways we can measure. Other changes are happening too, smaller ones, harder to spot, but real. Lactose tolerance. Most mammals stop producing lactase after childhood. Lactase is the enzyme that digests milk sugar. Baby mammals need it. Adults don't normally drink milk, so the gene shuts off. But some humans can digest milk as adults. Northern Europeans mostly, some African populations, a few others. They have a mutation that keeps the lactase gene active. This mutation appeared about 10,000 years ago, right when humans started keeping cattle, herding animals, having access to milk. People who could digest milk had more food, better nutrition, more children survived. The mutation spread. Now about 35% of humans can digest milk. That's billions of people, all from a mutation that happened 10,000 years ago. Blue eyes are even newer. The mutation appeared about 6,000 years ago. One person, somewhere near the Black Sea. Everyone with blue eyes today descends from that single person. 6,000 years ago. That's recent. That's after Stonehenge, after the pyramids. We know this because the gene for blue eyes is identical in everyone who has them. If it had appeared multiple times, there would be variations, but there aren't. It's the exact same mutation. One origin, one ancestor. Think about that. Every blue-eyed person on Earth shares a common ancestor from 6,000 years ago. You could theoretically trace the family tree. You'd find the connection. Evolution didn't stop. It sped up. Agriculture created new pressures. Cities created new pressures. Different diseases, different diets, different environments, natural selection kept working faster than before, actually, because there were more humans, more mutations happening, more variation to select from. We're evolving right now. In your lifetime, mutations are appearing. Some will spread, some will disappear. Your great-great-grandchildren might carry genes that don't exist yet. This is what keeps me up, not ancient history. This, the fact that we're not the end product. We're still changing, still adapting, still evolving, and nobody knows what comes next. Subscribe for more quiet nights like this. Tell me in the comments, where in the world are you right now? I always check the comments and it's fascinating, all drifting off to the same mysteries about our shared past. We're still changing. That's what keeps me coming back to this topic. Evolution didn't stop. It's happening now, in your lifetime. New mutations appearing, some spreading, some vanishing. Your descendants might carry genes that don't exist yet. The Bayao, the Tibetans, the Inuit, they're proof. Humans adapt faster than we thought possible, faster than the textbook said, and nobody knows what comes next. Here's what happens when your spleen contracts. The organ squeezes, blood cells pour out. Oxygen-rich cells flood your bloodstream. Your blood can suddenly carry more oxygen than it could a moment before. This happens to everyone during a dive. Your body senses low oxygen. Your spleen responds. It releases stored red blood cells. The effect lasts as long as you need it. But the Bajau have more to work with. Their spleens are 50% larger. That means they store more red blood cells. When their spleens contract, they release more oxygen carriers into circulation. A lot more. Scientists measured this. They compared Bayou divers to people from nearby farming villages. Both groups had their spleens scanned. Both groups held their breath. Both groups showed spleen contractions, but the Bayou started with bigger spleens, so they got a bigger boost. The difference is about 2 minutes underwater, maybe 3. That doesn't sound like much. But when you're walking on the ocean floor hunting fish, 3 extra minutes changes everything. You can go deeper, stay longer, catch more, come up less often. The gene responsible sits on chromosome 11. Scientists found it by comparing Bajau DNA to DNA from neighbouring populations. They looked for genetic variants that appeared more often in the Bajau. One gene stood out. It's called PDE10A. This gene controls spleen size. A specific variant of it appears in almost all Bajau people. The same variant is rare in nearby farming communities. Even Bajau people who never dive carry it. Children have it. Old people who stopped diving decades ago have it. The mutation probably appeared thousands of years ago. Maybe 5,000 years, maybe more. One person was born with a slightly larger spleen. They could dive longer, catch more food, feed more children. Those children inherited the gene. They dove better too. Generation after generation the trait spread. Natural selection in action, not in a textbook, not in fossils, in living people you could meet today. Think about the timescale. 5,000 years is nothing in evolutionary terms. Humans have existed for 300,000 years. Civilization for 10,000. 5,000 years ago, the pyramids hadn't been built yet. Writing was brand new. And in that tiny sliver of time, the Bayou developed a genetic adaptation to underwater hunting. That's fast. Incredibly fast. Evolution usually takes tens of thousands of years, sometimes hundreds of thousands. Major changes like walking upright took millions of years. But here's a population that changed in 5,000 years or less. This isn't unique to the Bayou. It's happening everywhere. The Tibetan Plateau sits at 12,000 feet above sea level. The air has 40% less oxygen than at sea level. Most people who visit Tibet get altitude sickness, headaches, nausea, exhaustion. Your body struggles to get enough oxygen. Your heart races. You breathe faster. Nothing helps much. Tibetans don't have this problem. They live at high altitude their whole lives. They work. They run. They climb mountains. No altitude sickness. No breathing problems. Their bodies work differently. Scientists studied this too. They compared Tibetan blood to Han Chinese blood. Both populations share ancestry. They split apart relatively recently, but Tibetans have different hemoglobin levels. Most people at high altitude develop thick blood, more red blood cells, more hemoglobin. Your body tries to carry more oxygen by making more carriers. This works, but it causes problems. Thick blood flows slowly. It clots easily. Pregnant women at high altitude face serious risks. Tibetans do the opposite. They have normal hemoglobin levels, sometimes lower than normal. Their blood stays thin, but they don't suffer from low oxygen. Their bodies use oxygen more efficiently instead of trying to carry more of it. The gene is called EPAS1. It regulates how your body responds to low oxygen. The Tibetan variant keeps hemoglobin production low even at altitude. This variant appears in 87% of Tibetans. It's almost absent in Han Chinese populations. The gene came from Denisovans, ancient human relatives who lived in Asia tens of thousands of years ago. Modern humans interbred with them. Most Denisovan DNA disappeared from our genome, but this one gene survived in Tibetans. It got preserved because it was useful. Scientists can date when this happened. The gene spread through the Tibetan population about 30,000 years ago. maybe as recently as 8,000 years ago. That's when Tibetans moved to high altitude permanently. The ones who carried the Denisovan gene survived better, had more children, passed it on 30,000 years. That's recent. Anatomically, modern humans appeared 300,000 years ago. 30,000 years is 10% of human history, a blip. The Inuit show another pattern. They live in the Arctic. Their traditional diet is almost entirely meat and fat, seal, whale, fish, very few plants, no agriculture. For thousands of years, this was the only food available. Most populations can't handle that diet. Too much fat causes heart disease, cholesterol problems, but the Inuit have low rates of heart disease despite eating mostly fat. Their bodies process fat differently. Genetic studies found variants in genes called FADS1 and FADS2. These genes control how your body processes fatty acids. The Inuit variants make their bodies more efficient at handling high-fat diets. The genes appeared in the population within the last 20,000 years, probably much more recently. 20,000 years ago, humans were still hunter-gatherers. Agriculture didn't exist. Cities didn't exist. And yet, in that time, the Inuit developed genetic adaptations to their specific environment. These aren't small changes, these are fundamental alterations to how bodies work. Spleen size, oxygen use, fat metabolism, major biological systems, all changed in a few thousand years. Here's what this means. Evolution isn't slow. It doesn't only happen over millions of years. It can happen fast when the pressure is strong enough, when the environment demands it, when survival depends on it. The Bahau needed to dive. The Tibetans needed to breathe thin air. The Inuit needed to eat what was available. The ones who could do these things better survived, had children, passed on their genes. Within a few thousand years, the whole population changed. This is still happening. New mutations appear constantly. Every human baby is born with about 60 new mutations. Most do nothing. Some are harmful. A few, very rarely, are helpful. If a helpful mutation appears, it can spread, not over millions of years, over thousands, maybe even hundreds. If the advantage is strong enough, if the population is small enough, if the environment is demanding enough, evolution happens fast. We're watching it happen. Scientists can track it now. They can compare genomes across populations. They can see which genes are under selection, which variants are spreading, which are disappearing. Some populations are developing resistance to malaria. Others show adaptations to digesting milk in adulthood. Still others have genes that help process starch-heavy diets. Each population faces different pressures. Each responds differently. Your genome carries the history of where your ancestors lived, what they ate, what diseases they faced, what challenges they survived. Those challenges left marks, changed genes, shifted frequencies, made you slightly different from people whose ancestors lived somewhere else. And it's not stopping. The environment keeps changing. Humans keep adapting. New mutations keep appearing. Some will spread. Others will vanish. In 1,000 years, humans will have different gene frequencies than we do now. Different traits, different adaptations. We don't know what comes next, but we know it's coming. The Andes Mountains run for 4,000 miles down the western edge of South America. Parts of the range sit above 13,000 feet. The air is thin. Oxygen levels drop. Most people struggle to breathe up there. But millions live in these mountains. They've been there for thousands of years. Cities, farms, entire civilizations built at altitudes that would leave most visitors gasping. The Quechua people live throughout the Andes. So do the Aymara. These populations have been at high altitude for at least 11,000 years, maybe longer, and their bodies work differently than people from sea level. Scientists noticed this in the 1960s. They measured lung capacity in Andean populations. The numbers were strange. Andean people had larger lung volumes than lowlanders, bigger chests, more air capacity. Their bodies were built for thin air. But here's what's interesting. It's not just lung size. The whole respiratory system is different. Andean populations have higher oxygen saturation in their blood. That means their blood carries oxygen more efficiently. They don't need to breathe as fast as lowlanders do at altitude. Their hearts don't race. They work normally, comfortably, like someone at sea level. Scientists compared Andean populations to Tibetans. Both live at high altitude. Both face the same problem. Low oxygen, thin air, but they solved it differently. Tibetans keep their hemoglobin levels normal. Their blood stays thin. They use oxygen more efficiently instead of making more carriers. Andean populations do the opposite. They have higher hemoglobin levels, more red blood cells, thicker blood. Their bodies carry more oxygen by making more carriers. Both strategies work. Both populations thrive at altitude. But they evolve different solutions to the same problem. This tells us something important. Evolution doesn't have one answer. Different populations find different solutions. The path depends on what mutations appear, what genes are available, what the starting point is. The Andean adaptations are genetic. Studies found several genes under selection. Genes that control blood vessel growth. Genes that regulate oxygen sensing. Genes that affect lung development. One gene is called eDNRB. It controls blood vessel formation. The Andean variant helps blood vessels grow differently, more efficiently. This improves blood flow at high altitude. Another gene is PRKAA1. It helps cells sense and respond to low oxygen. The Andean variant makes this response more effective. Cells can work with less oxygen available. These genes didn't appear overnight. They spread through the population over thousands of years. Each generation, people with helpful variants survived better, had more children, passed on their genes. Scientists can estimate when this started. The genetic signatures suggest selection began at least 10,000 years ago, probably when people first moved permanently to high altitude. The ones who could breathe easier survived. The ones who struggled didn't. 10,000 years. That's all it took. Humans went from sea level to mountain peaks. Their bodies changed to match. Now look at another example. Completely different environment, different challenge, different solution. The Inuit live in the Arctic. Temperatures drop to -50 degrees Fahrenheit. Darkness lasts for months. The environment is brutal. Traditional Inuit diet is almost all meat and fat, seal, whale, caribou, fish, very little plant material, no fruits, no vegetables, no grains. This diet would kill most people. High fat intake usually causes heart disease. Cholesterol builds up. Arteries clog. But the Inuit have some of the lowest heart disease rates in the world. Despite eating more fat than almost any other population, their bodies process fat differently. Genetic studies found the reason. Variants in genes called FADS1, FADS2, and FADS3. These genes control fatty acid metabolism, how your body breaks down and uses fat. The Inuit variants are unique. They appear in almost all Inuit people. They're rare or absent in other populations, and they change how fat gets processed. Instead of storing fat and building up cholesterol, Inuit bodies convert it more efficiently, use it for energy, keep it moving. The fat doesn't accumulate the same way. This adaptation is recent, very recent. Genetic dating suggests it appeared within the last 20,000 years, possibly as recently as 5,000 years ago. 5,000 years ago, Egypt was building pyramids. Sumerians were inventing writing, and in the Arctic the Inuit were evolving new genes to handle their diet. That's incredibly fast. Faster than anyone expected evolution to work. Here's another one. Lactose tolerance. The ability to digest milk as an adult. Most mammals lose this ability after weaning. Baby mammals produce an enzyme called lactase. It breaks down the sugar in milk. But once they're weaned, the gene shuts off. Adults can't digest milk anymore. Humans followed this pattern for most of our history. Adults couldn't drink milk, only children could. Then something changed. About 10,000 years ago, some populations started herding animals. Cows, goats, sheep. They had access to milk, lots of it, fresh milk every day. Most adults still couldn't digest it, but some could. A mutation appeared that kept the lactase gene active into adulthood. People with this mutation could drink milk, get calories and nutrients from it, feed their children with it. This was a huge advantage. Extra food source, reliable nutrition. The mutation spread. Today, about 35% of humans can digest lactose as adults. But the distribution isn't even. In Northern Europe, over 90% of people have the mutation. In East Asia, less than 10% do. The difference is history. Northern European populations herded cattle for thousands of years. The mutation appeared early. It spread fast. Almost everyone has it now. East Asian populations didn't herd dairy animals traditionally. The mutation either didn't appear or didn't provide an advantage. It stayed rare. This happened in 10,000 years. One mutation. Massive change in who can drink milk. All because of cows. Scientists found another example in East Asian populations, a gene called EDAR. It affects hair thickness, tooth shape, sweat gland density. A specific variant of EDAR is common in East Asian populations. It makes hair thicker, changes tooth shape slightly, increases the number of sweat glands. This variant is about 30,000 years old. It spread rapidly through East Asian populations. Today, it appears in over 90% of people with East Asian ancestry. Nobody knows why it spread. The advantages aren't obvious. Thicker hair might help with cold. More sweat glands might help with heat. Or maybe it was sexual selection. People preferred the look, chose partners who had it. Whatever the reason, it spread. Fast. Throughout an entire continental population. These examples show the same pattern. Environmental pressure, genetic mutation, rapid selection, population-wide change, all in thousands of years, not millions. Evolution is still happening, right now. In living populations, scientists can track it. Some populations in malaria zones are developing resistance. A gene called G6PD has variants that protect against malaria. These variants are spreading in Africa, in Southeast Asia, in the Mediterranean, wherever malaria is common. Other populations show adaptations to high-starch diets. The AMA1 gene controls how many copies of amylase you produce. That's the enzyme that breaks down starch. Populations that ate lots of starch for generations have more AMY1 copies. Their bodies produce more amylase. They digest starch better. Agricultural populations have more copies than hunter-gatherers. The difference appeared in the last 10,000 years, since agriculture started. Your body carries the history of what your ancestors ate, where they lived, what diseases they faced, what challenges they survived. If your ancestors lived in the Arctic, you might carry Inuit genes for fat metabolism. If they lived in the Andes, you might have genes for high altitude. If they herded cattle in Europe, you probably can drink milk. These aren't just interesting facts. They're evidence. Proof that evolution happens fast when it needs to. When the pressure is strong enough. When survival depends on it. The Bayao developed bigger spleens in 5,000 years. The Tibetans adapted to altitude in 30,000. The Inuit evolved new fat metabolism in 20,000. Lactose tolerance spread in 10,000. These are eye blinks in evolutionary time. Humans have existed for 300,000 years. These changes happened in the last 3 to 10% of that time. Recent history, yesterday, in evolutionary terms, and it's not stopping. New mutations appear constantly. Every baby born carries about 60 new mutations. Most do nothing. Some are harmful. A few might be helpful. If a helpful mutation appears in the right place at the right time, it can spread, change a population, create a new adaptation within thousands of years, maybe less. We don't know what's being selected for right now. We won't know for generations. But something is, somewhere, in some population. New genes are spreading, old ones are fading, humans are changing, the environment keeps shifting, we keep adapting, not consciously, not deliberately, but inevitably. The ones who fit survive, the ones who don't struggle. This has been true for 300,000 years. It's still true now. It will be true for as long as humans exist. We are not the end point of evolution. We're just another step, another stage. Our descendants will be different from us, slightly, in ways we can't predict, carrying genes that don't exist yet, adapted to challenges we haven't faced. The Bayao show us this. So do the Tibetans, the Andeans, the Inuit. Every population that adapted to its environment. They're all proof. Evolution didn't stop when humans appeared. It kept going. It's still going. We're watching it happen. In real time. In living people. The story isn't finished. It never will be. Ethiopia sits at the Horn of Africa. The highlands rise above 7,000 feet. The landscape is rugged. Mountains, valleys, high plateaus. People have lived here for thousands of years. The Ethiopian highlands are one of the highest inhabited places on Earth. But something's different here. The adaptation pattern doesn't match what we saw in Tibet or the Andes. Scientists studied Ethiopian populations in the 2000s. They expected to find the same genes under selection, the same adaptations. High-altitude populations should all evolve similar solutions, right? They face the same problem. Low oxygen, thin air, the body needs to compensate. But the Ethiopian genes were different. Completely different. Tibetans have variants in EPAS1 and EGLN1. These genes control how the body responds to low oxygen. The variants keep hemoglobin levels normal. Blood stays thin. The body uses oxygen more efficiently. Andean populations have different variants. Higher hemoglobin, more oxygen carriers, thicker blood, different solution to the same problem. Ethiopian highlanders have neither pattern. Their genes show selection in completely different pathways, different biological systems, different mechanisms entirely. One gene stood out, BHLHE41. It affects how cells respond to oxygen levels, but it works through a different pathway than the Tibetan genes, a different part of the cellular machinery. Another gene is VAV3. It's involved in blood vessel development, but again, different from the Andean genes. Different approach to improving blood flow. The Ethiopian adaptations are just as effective. People live and work at altitude without problems, but they got there through a different route, different mutations, different genetic changes, different evolutionary path. This tells us something profound about evolution. There isn't one solution to any problem. There are many possible solutions. The path depends on what mutations happen to appear, what genetic variation exists in the population, what the starting point is. Think about it like this. You need to get across a river. You could build a bridge. You could use a boat. You could find a shallow spot and wade across. You could swim. All of these work. All of these get you to the other side. but which one you use depends on what materials you have, what skills you possess, what options present themselves. Evolution works the same way. The environment creates pressure. Survive at altitude or don't survive at all. But how you survive depends on what genetic tools are available, what mutations appear, what variation exists. Tibetans, Andeans, and Ethiopians all solved the altitude problem, but they used different genetic tools, different mutations, different genes, 3 populations, 3 different solutions, all effective. Scientists found another example in Africa: malaria resistance. The disease kills millions. It's been a major selective pressure for thousands of years. Populations in malaria zones evolved resistance, but they did it differently. Some populations have the sickle cell trait, a mutation in the hemoglobin gene. 1 copy protects against malaria, 2 copies cause sickle cell disease. But in malaria zones, having 1 copy is an advantage. You're protected from malaria. You don't get sick from the mutation. Other populations develop different resistance. Variants in a gene called G6PD. These variants change how red blood cells work. They make it harder for the malaria parasite to survive inside the cell. Different mechanism, same protection. Still other populations have variants in the Duffy antigen gene. This gene affects how malaria parasites enter blood cells. The variants block entry. The parasite can't infect you. Different solution again. 3 different genetic changes, all providing malaria resistance, all appearing in different populations, all effective. This pattern shows up everywhere scientists look. Different populations, different adaptations, different genetic solutions to similar problems. Arctic populations developed genes for fat metabolism. But not all Arctic populations have the same variants. Inuit have 1 set of genes. Siberian populations have different ones. Both work. Both allow survival in extreme cold on high-fat diets. But the genetic basis is different. Skin color is another example. Light skin evolved in northern populations. Less sun, less ultraviolet radiation. The body needs to make vitamin D efficiently with limited sunlight. Lighter skin helps, but light skin evolved multiple times in Europe, in East Asia, in different populations at different times, and the genetic basis is different each time. Europeans have variants in genes like SLC24A5 and SLC45A2. These genes affect melanin production. The variants reduce melanin, skin gets lighter. East Asian populations have different variants, different genes. OCA2 and HERC2 show selection. These also affect melanin, but through different pathways, different cellular mechanisms, same result. Lighter skin, better vitamin D production, but different genetic routes to get there. This is what makes evolution so fascinating and so unpredictable. You can't predict which solution will appear, which genes will mutate, which variants will spread. The environment creates pressure. Natural selection favors solutions, but which solution appears depends on chance, on what mutations happen to occur, on what genetic variation exists in that specific population at that specific time. 2 populations facing identical challenges might evolve completely different adaptations, because different mutations appeared, different genes were available, different starting points. The Ethiopian highlanders prove this. They live at altitude just like Tibetans, just like Andeans. They face the same oxygen challenge, the same environmental pressure, but they evolved different genes, different adaptations, a different biological solution. And here's what really matters. All 3 solutions work equally well. There's no best answer, no optimal solution, just different paths that all lead to survival. Scientists can see this happening in real time. Lactose tolerance evolved multiple times. The ability to digest milk as an adult. It appeared independently in different populations. European lactose tolerance comes from a variant near the LCT gene. This variant keeps the lactase enzyme active into adulthood. It appeared about 10,000 years ago. It spread through populations that herded cattle. But African populations developed lactose tolerance too, independently. Different mutation, different location in the genome, but same result. Adults can drink milk. The mutations appeared separately, in different places, at different times. But both spread because both provided the same advantage. Access to milk as a food source. This is convergent evolution at the genetic level. Different populations, different mutations, same adaptation, same solution to the same problem. It happens because evolution doesn't plan ahead. It doesn't know what's coming. It can only work with what's available right now. What mutations exist, what genes are present, what variation the population carries. If a helpful mutation appears, it spreads. If it doesn't appear, the population might find a different solution, or might not adapt at all, or might go extinct. The path isn't predetermined. The outcome isn't certain. Evolution is contingent, dependent on chance, on what happens to occur. The Ethiopian Highlanders could have evolved the same genes as Tibetans, if the right mutations had appeared, if the genetic variation had been there, but it wasn't. So they found a different path, different genes, different solution, and this is still happening. Right now, in living populations, new mutations appearing, some spreading, some vanishing. Different populations finding different solutions to modern challenges. We can't predict what will happen next, what genes will change, what adaptations will appear. We can only watch. Document. Try to understand. The story of human evolution isn't a straight line. It's a branching tree. Different populations, different environments, different challenges, different solutions, all happening simultaneously, all effective, all valid. The Ethiopians show us this, so do the Tibetans, the Andeans, the Inuit, every population that adapted to its environment. They all found their own way, their own genetic solution, their own path forward, and that path is still unfolding, still branching, still creating new solutions, new adaptations, new ways of being human. Milk is strange when you think about it. Humans are the only mammals that drink milk after childhood, the only ones that drink another species' milk. For most of human history, this was impossible. Adults couldn't digest it. Your body makes an enzyme called lactase. It breaks down lactose. That's the sugar in milk. Babies produce lots of lactase. They need it. Milk is their only food, but around age 5, the gene shuts off. Lactase production stops. The body assumes you won't need it anymore. Without lactase, milk makes you sick. Bloating, cramps, diarrhea. Your gut can't process the lactose. Bacteria ferment it instead. The results are unpleasant. This is still true for most humans. About 65% of adults worldwide are lactose intolerant. They can't drink milk, their bodies never adapted. But some populations can. They produce lactase throughout their entire lives. The gene never shuts off. They can drink milk as adults without any problems. This adaptation is recent. Very recent. It appeared within the last 10,000 years. That's a blink in evolutionary time, and we can trace exactly when and where it happened. The story starts with cattle herding. Around 9000 BCE, people in the Near East domesticated cattle. Cows became a food source. Meat, leather, eventually milk. But at first, nobody could drink fresh milk as an adult. They found workarounds. Fermentation breaks down lactose. Cheese has less lactose than milk. Yogurt too. People could eat these without getting sick, so early herders made cheese, made yogurt, processed the milk before consuming it. Then something changed. A mutation appeared. A single letter change in the DNA, not in the lactase gene itself, in a regulatory region nearby. This tiny change kept the lactase gene active into adulthood. The mutation appeared in one person, probably somewhere in Central Europe, around 7,500 years ago. That person could drink milk. Their children inherited the mutation. Some of them could drink milk too. This was an enormous advantage. Fresh milk is nutritious. Protein, calories, calcium. If you're herding cattle, you're carrying food with you, but only if you can digest it. The people with this mutation had access to more calories, more nutrition. They were healthier, had more children. Those children inherited the gene. They had more children. The mutation spread. Scientists can track this spread through ancient DNA. They've tested bones from archaeological sites across Europe. The pattern is clear. 7,000 years ago, almost nobody in Europe could digest milk. By 4,000 years ago, the mutation was common. Today, it's found in over 90% of Northern Europeans. That's incredibly fast. Most genetic changes take hundreds of thousands of years to spread. This one swept through Europe in 3,000 years. It's one of the strongest examples of natural selection in humans ever. The advantage was that powerful. Being able to drink milk meant survival, especially in northern climates, long winters, limited food sources. If you could get calories from your cattle year-round, you lived. If you couldn't, you might not make it. But here's where it gets interesting. The same mutation didn't spread everywhere. Different populations developed lactose tolerance independently. Through completely different genetic changes, East African populations herd cattle too. They've done so for thousands of years. The Maasai, the Tutsi, many groups across Kenya, Tanzania and Uganda. These populations drink milk, lots of it. Fresh milk is a dietary staple. Scientists assumed they'd have the same European mutation, same adaptation, same genetic change. They were wrong. East Africans have different mutations, at least 3 distinct variants, all in the same regulatory region near the lactase gene, but different specific changes, different letters in the DNA sequence. Each variant does the same thing, keeps the lactase gene active, allows milk digestion in adults, but they arose independently. Separate mutations, separate evolutionary events. One variant is common in Kenya and Tanzania, another in Sudan and Ethiopia, a third in parts of West Africa. All appeared within the last few thousand years, all spread rapidly through herding populations, all provide the same advantage. This is parallel evolution. Different populations, same environmental pressure, same challenge, but different genetic solutions, different mutations that accomplish the same goal. The mutations appeared because people needed them, because there was strong selection pressure. The populations that could digest milk thrived. Those that couldn't had fewer children. The genes spread. But the specific mutations were random. The European change happened to appear in Europe. The African changes happened to appear in Africa. They weren't the same because mutations are chance events. What matters is the result, not the path. Scientists found another example in Arabia. Bedouin populations herd camels. They drink camel milk, and they have lactose tolerance. But their mutation is different again. A 4th independent variant. Same regulatory region. Different specific change. 4 populations, 4 different mutations, all providing lactose tolerance, all appearing independently within the last 8,000 years. This tells us something crucial. Evolution is repeatable, but not predictable. If you create the same environmental pressure, you get similar adaptations, but not identical ones. The genetic route varies. The mutations that happen to appear vary. The specific solution depends on chance. The European mutation is called -13,910*T. That's its technical name. The position in the genome where it occurs, scientists can test for it with a simple genetic screen. If you have Northern European ancestry and can drink milk, you probably carry this variant. The East African mutations have different names: -14,010*C, -13,915*G, -13,907*G. Different positions, different changes, but same effect, same ability to digest lactose. Researchers studied how fast these mutations spread. They used computer models, calculated selection coefficients. The numbers are striking. The European variant increased fitness by about 10%. That means people with the mutation had 10% more surviving children than people without it. 10% doesn't sound like much. But compound that over generations, over centuries. It's enormous. It's enough to take a mutation from one person to 90% of the population in 3,000 years. The African variant spread just as fast, maybe faster in some regions. The selection pressure was just as strong, maybe stronger. In dry climates, milk isn't just nutrition, it's hydration, it's survival. We can see this happening in real time in some populations. Central Asian groups are still adapting. Some individuals have lactose tolerance, others don't. The gene frequency is changing, the mutation is spreading, evolution in action. This is what makes lactose tolerance so valuable for studying human evolution. It's recent enough that we can track it. We have ancient DNA from before the mutation appeared. We have DNA from when it was spreading. We have modern populations at different stages of adaptation. It's a complete picture, a time-lapse of natural selection. From the first mutation to near fixation in some populations, all documented in the genetic record, and it shows us how fast humans can evolve, how quickly a useful mutation can spread, how powerful natural selection can be when the advantage is clear. The people who first drank milk didn't know they were evolving, didn't know they carried a mutation. They just knew milk didn't make them sick, that they could feed their children, that they survived winters others didn't. The mutation spread silently, generation by generation, parent to child, through populations that had no concept of genes or evolution or DNA. The biology happened whether they understood it or not. Today you can buy milk in any grocery store, but your ability to drink it depends on your ancestry, on whether your ancestors herded cattle, on whether the right mutation appeared in your population, on thousands of years of natural selection. If you're lactose intolerant, you're actually normal. You're like most humans throughout history. Your body is doing what human bodies are supposed to do. Shutting off lactase production after childhood. If you can drink milk, you're the mutant. You carry a genetic change that appeared recently, that spread because it was useful, that marks you as descended from herders. Either way, you're looking at evolution, at how humans are still changing, at how our genes respond to our culture, to our food, to the choices our ancestors made thousands of years ago. The mutation is still spreading. In some populations, it's still increasing in frequency, still being selected for. The process isn't finished, won't be finished for thousands more years, maybe never, if our relationship with milk changes again. The human body is a battleground. Every day it fights off invaders, viruses, bacteria, even parasites. Most of the time, you don't even notice the struggle. You just go about your day while your immune system works behind the scenes. But evolution is always at play here, shaping the tools your body uses to stay alive. Some of the most important changes in our DNA have come from these invisible wars. The story isn't just about survival, it's about who we are and how we got here. Let's start with a simple question. Why do some people get sick more easily than others? Part of the answer is luck. Part is environment, what you eat, where you live, who you meet, but a big part is written in your genes, and those genes are shaped by history, by disasters most of us have forgotten. Take malaria. It's a disease caused by tiny parasites carried by mosquitoes. Even today, it kills hundreds of thousands of people every year. In the past, it was even worse. Whole regions were shaped by malaria. People lived, worked, and even built their homes to avoid mosquitoes. But the real battle was inside the body. Some people are born with a mutation called sickle cell. It changes the shape of their red blood cells. Normally these cells are round and soft like little pillows. But with the mutation, some turn stiff and crescent-shaped. This is dangerous. Sickle-shaped cells can block blood flow. They can cause pain, organ damage, even death. So why does this mutation exist? Why didn't evolution wipe it out? The answer is malaria. The sickle cell mutation gives you a hidden advantage. If you have just one copy of the gene from one parent, you get some sickled cells, but not enough to make you seriously ill. Your blood is still mostly normal. However, the malaria parasite can't easily infect these sickled cells. It tries, but the cell's shape gets in the way. The parasite can't grow as well. This means one copy of the sickle cell gene gives you protection. You're less likely to get very sick from malaria. In places where malaria is common, like West Africa, India, and some parts of the Middle East, this protection was a huge deal. People with the mutation survived more often. They had more children. The gene spread. But there's a catch. If you get 2 copies of the sickle cell gene, one from each parent, you get sickle cell disease. Now, most of your red blood cells are the wrong shape. This causes severe health problems. It's a trade-off. Protection against malaria comes with a risk. This is called a genetic compromise. Evolution doesn't care about perfect health. It cares about what helps you survive and have children. In malaria zones, the sickle cell mutation stuck around because it helped more people survive than it harmed. In places without malaria, the mutation faded away. It didn't help anymore, so it slowly disappeared. There are other mutations like this. In some parts of Asia, people have a mutation called thalassemia. It also changes the way blood cells work. It can cause anemia, a shortage of healthy red blood cells. But again, it offers some malaria protection. The parasite can't infect the altered cells as easily. These kinds of changes are everywhere. Another example is G6PD deficiency. This mutation affects an enzyme in red blood cells. People with it can get sick from certain foods, medicines, or infections. But the same mutation makes life harder for malaria parasites. So in malaria-heavy areas, it stuck around. When you zoom out, you see a pattern. Our bodies are full of these disease fighter genes. Sometimes they hurt us. Sometimes they save us. The balance is always shifting depending on what threats are out there. Let's leave malaria for a moment and talk about another ancient enemy, the plague. In the 1300s, Europe was hit by the Black Death. It killed millions, maybe a third of all people in some regions. Cities emptied, whole families vanished. The survivors were changed, not just in memory but in their bodies. Scientists have studied old graves from plague times. They've looked at the DNA of people buried before, during, and after outbreaks. What they found is striking. Certain gene variants became more common after the plague. One of them is called CCR5-delta-32. People with this mutation are missing a small piece of a receptor on their white blood cells. Why does that matter? Some diseases use this receptor as a way into the cell. Without the right door, the invader can't get in. The Black Death was likely caused by bacteria, but later the same gene variant turned out to protect against another killer, HIV. People who have 2 copies of CCR5-delta-32 are almost immune to HIV infection. The virus just can't open the door. Did the plague directly select for this mutation? That's still debated, but the timing matches up. The mutation is most common in places hit hardest by plague. It's rare in other regions. This is how diseases shape our genes even centuries later. And there's more. Some people are resistant to leprosy. Others have genes that make them less likely to get tuberculosis. These aren't superpowers. They're the echoes of millions of battles, tiny changes that gave someone an edge long ago. One of the best studied examples comes from the Duffy antigen. This is a protein on the surface of red blood cells. In most of the world, people have it. But in much of West Africa, most people don't. Why? Because a type of malaria parasite, Plasmodium vivax, needs the Duffy antigen to get into the cell. If you don't have the protein, you can't get sick from that kind of malaria. The gene for Duffy negativity became common wherever this parasite was a threat. Now let's talk about smallpox. For hundreds of years, smallpox was one of the deadliest diseases on Earth. It killed fast and left survivors with scars, but in some populations, people seem to have a natural resistance. Scientists think this might come from genes that control the immune response. Variants in these genes might have helped people survive smallpox outbreaks. The details are still being worked out, but the pattern is familiar. Disease comes, some people survive, their genes become more common. Even today, we see how old battles shape new ones. The same genes that helped fight off ancient infections can cause problems now. For example, the HLA gene family controls how your body recognizes invaders. Some versions are great at spotting bacteria or viruses from the past. But the price is a higher risk of autoimmune disease. Sometimes your immune system gets confused and attacks your own body. It's the same story, a trade-off. The benefit was worth the risk in the past, but now, as our environment changes, the balance can shift. What about allergies? It turns out the genes that help fight parasites can make you more likely to have allergies. In places where people used to get lots of worm infections, a strong immune response was helpful. Now, in cleaner environments, that same response can trigger allergies, runny noses, itchy eyes, even asthma. The genes didn't change. The world did. There's another layer to all this, the microbiome. That's the collection of bacteria and other tiny organisms living in your gut. Everyone's microbiome is a little different. Some of that difference is genetic. Some comes from your diet, your family, even your pets. The bacteria in your gut help train your immune system. They teach it what's dangerous and what's not. If your ancestors faced certain diseases, your microbiome might still carry traces of that history. Scientists are only beginning to understand this, but it looks like some immune system genes work better with certain gut bacteria. If the match is right, you're less likely to get sick. If it's wrong, you might be more vulnerable, not just to infections, but to things like diabetes or obesity. The story is still unfolding, but it's clear that our bodies and our microbes have been evolving together for a long time. Now, let's talk about blood types. You might know your own, AB, AB, or O. But have you ever wondered why there are different types? It's not just a random quirk. Blood types are shaped by disease. For example, people with type O blood are less likely to get severe malaria. The parasite has a harder time sticking to their red blood cells. In some places, O blood is very common, especially where malaria has been a big problem. But there's a twist. People with O blood are more likely to get severe cholera, a deadly gut infection. So the best blood type depends on which diseases are common where you live. Type A and B blood types offer different trade-offs. Certain viruses or bacteria can use the A or B antigens to sneak into cells. In some outbreaks, people with type A or B were hit harder. In others, they had an advantage. It's a constant push and pull shaped by whatever disease was most dangerous at the time. Even the rare blood types, like the Bombay phenotype, where people lack the usual antigens, are products of chance and selection. Sometimes a rare blood type suddenly becomes common in a small group, usually because it helps fight off a local disease. Think about this. Every one of these changes took place over hundreds of generations. A person got sick. Maybe they survived because of a tiny change in their DNA. They had children. The children survived too. Over time, that small advantage grew. It spread through families, then villages, then whole regions. That's how disease fighters work. They don't make you invincible. They just tilt the odds a little at a time, and they never stop shifting. In one era, a gene is helpful. In another, it's a risk. One of the wildest stories comes from the people of Papua New Guinea. They faced a brain disease called kuru. It was spread by eating the brains of relatives during funeral rituals. Most people who got kuru died, but a few families carried a rare gene variant called G127V. This mutation made the prion, the bad protein that causes kuru, less able to damage the brain. Over time, the mutation spread. People with the gene survived. Their children did too. As ritual cannibalism faded, the pressure eased, but the gene is still there. A record of an old, strange battle. Let's zoom out. Our immune system is one of the most complex things in nature. It's not a single thing. It's a network. It's always learning, always adapting. Some of that learning comes from your own experience. Every cold, every cut, every vaccine. But much of it comes from your ancestors, from what they faced, fought, and survived. Genes that protected against one disease might make you vulnerable to another. It's a moving target. The world changes. Diseases come and go. Our genes shift, sometimes fast, sometimes slow. The story is never finished. Sometimes these battles leave marks on our bodies that we don't even notice. The shape of your nose, for example, is partly shaped by climate and infection. In dry, dusty places, narrow noses help warm and moisten the air before it hits your lungs. In tropical regions, wider noses help cool you down. These changes also affect how easily you get certain sinus infections. It's a small thing, but it matters. Even our skin is part of the story. Darker skin protects against the sun's rays and helps prevent damage that can lead to skin cancer. But it also helps stop folate, a vitamin needed for healthy babies, from breaking down in strong sunlight. Lighter skin lets you make more. Vitamin D in places with less sun. Both are disease fighters shaped by where your ancestors lived. And it's not just big, obvious diseases. Tiny parasites like hookworm or schistosomiasis have shaped genes in some populations. Stomach bacteria like Helicobacter pylori, which can cause ulcers, are more common in some groups than others. Sometimes these bugs live with us for years with no problem. Other times they cause serious illness. The balance is always changing. Here's another twist. Diseases brought by outsiders have changed gene pools too. When Europeans arrived in the Americas, they brought smallpox, measles, and other diseases. Native populations had never faced these threats. They had almost no resistance. The results were devastating. Over just a few generations, the survivors' genes shifted again, sometimes in unpredictable ways. Today we're facing new battles. Antibiotic resistance is spreading. New viruses appear. Old diseases come back. Our genes are still shifting in response. Sometimes the solutions are medical. Vaccines, medicines, better sanitation. But the slow work of evolution keeps going too. Some people are born with natural resistance. Some aren't. Scientists are now trying to find these disease fighter genes. They study ancient bones, living people, even DNA from mummies. They compare genes from different parts of the world. They look for patterns. Who survived? Who thrived? Who carried which mutations? The more we learn, the clearer it gets. Our DNA is shaped by the history of disease. But there's a mystery in all of this. Sometimes, a mutation that helped in one place is harmful in another. A gene that kept your ancestors alive in Africa might increase your risk for a disease in Europe or the Americas, or the other way around. There's no perfect set of genes. There's just a series of bets made over thousands of years on what would help the most people survive. That's why genetic diversity is powerful. The more variety in a population, the better the odds that someone will have the right tool for the next challenge. If everyone had the exact same genes, a new disease could wipe them out. But with variety, at least some people are likely to survive. So, when you think about your own health, remember this. You're carrying the results of 1,000 invisible wars. Your ancestors faced dangers you can't even imagine. Some of their victories are written in your DNA. Others faded away when they were no longer needed. And the story keeps going. New diseases appear. Old ones return. The genes that helped last century might cause trouble now, or they might save someone else tomorrow. Here's what gets me. Evolution is not just something that happened a long time ago. It's happening right now, inside you, inside everyone. The next big mutation might already be out there, spreading quietly, waiting for its moment. We like to think we're in control, that medicine and technology have ended these battles. But the truth is the fight never really stops. It just changes shape. And sometimes, the most important changes are the ones we barely notice. A tiny shift in a gene, a new way the body fights off an infection. The story of humans is a story of disease, survival, and silent, ongoing change. But some changes are happening so quietly we barely notice. Let's look closer at the kinds of changes happening inside us, the ones you can't see in the mirror. These shifts are quiet. They don't make headlines, but they're just as real as any big mutation from the past. The body's always adjusting, sometimes in ways you'd never expect. Start with something simple, how your body handles heat. There's a study from the early 2000s that looked at marathon runners. Some runners were from Kenya, others from Northern Europe. All of them trained hard. But they didn't all sweat the same way. The Kenyan runners started sweating sooner, even before. They felt hot. Their sweat glands kicked in faster. That helped keep their bodies cooler, even under the same sun. Meanwhile, the European runners usually waited until they felt hot before they started to sweat. The difference wasn't just about habit, it was genetic. Hundreds of small changes in sweat gland function, skin thickness, and salt balance made the difference. Each body was tuned for a different climate, a different challenge. This isn't just about athletes. If you grew up in a hot place, your body probably learned to sweat earlier and more. Your blood vessels shifted to help you lose heat. If you lived in a cold place, your blood vessels did the opposite. They held heat close. Some groups even have more fat under the skin, like a built-in blanket. These are old adaptations passed down quietly, body to body. Now, think about viruses. The last few years have shown us how fast a virus can change the world. But humans have been fighting viruses for a long time. The genes that help fight off flu, measles, or even the common cold are always in play. Sometimes the changes are tiny, just a letter or two different in your DNA code, but they matter. In one study, researchers looked at families during a flu outbreak. Some people got sick over and over. Others barely had a sniffle. The difference: certain gene variants made their immune systems react faster or keep the virus from spreading. But here's where it gets weird. Sometimes a gene that helps fight one virus makes you more likely to have trouble with another. There's a variant that protects against norovirus, the virus that causes stomach flu. People with this variant are less likely to get sick when exposed, but the same gene makes them more likely to catch a different stomach bug. It's a constant trade-off, one step forward, another sideways. The story gets even stranger when you look at new diseases. Take COVID-19. Early in the pandemic, scientists scrambled to figure out why some people got so much sicker than others. Age mattered, of course. So did general health. But genes played a role too. Some people had versions of immune system genes that made their bodies overreact. Others had genes that made them less likely to get infected in the first place. In fact, one gene, called OAS1, seems to have come from Neanderthals. It helps fight off certain viruses better. People who carry this ancient gene were a little less likely to get very sick with COVID-19. That's right. Some of us are still carrying bits of Neanderthal DNA. These aren't just leftovers. They're working genes doing real jobs in the body. When modern humans left Africa and spread into Europe and Asia, they met Neanderthals. Some had children together. The Neanderthal DNA that stuck around is mostly in genes related to the immune system and skin. It's like picking up a few extra tools for survival. Tools that worked in ancient Europe and sometimes still help today. But not all these ancient genes are helpful now. Some make people more likely to have allergies or autoimmune problems. It's the same old story, a trade-off that made sense back then, but can cause issues now. The world changes. Our bodies are still catching up. Let's talk about another invisible shift, how our bodies process fat. For most of history, getting enough food was a daily struggle. People who could store energy as fat had a big advantage. Their bodies were good at saving calories for lean times. Scientists call this the thrifty gene idea. It's simple. If your ancestors faced famine, you probably have genes that help you hold on to calories. In places where food was scarce, these genes became common. People with them survived tough times. But now, in many countries, food is everywhere. The same genes that used to help now backfire. They make some people more likely to gain weight, even with normal eating. Diabetes and heart disease become more common. The adaptation didn't change. The environment did. This is happening all over the world, but especially in places where people went from food scarcity to abundance in just a few generations. Here's a clear example. In the Pacific Islands, like Samoa and Tonga, rates of obesity and diabetes are among the highest on Earth. Scientists looked at the genes of Samoan people and found a variant in a gene called CREBRF. This version helps the body store fat more easily. In the old days, when food was unpredictable, this was a lifesaver. Now with modern diets, it's a risk. Nearly half of Samoans have this gene version. The same pattern shows up in other island groups, and even in Native American populations. A strength turned into a weakness, all because the world flipped. This isn't just about food. It's about salt too. Some people's bodies hold on to salt more tightly. This used to help in places where salt was rare or when sweating a lot. Today, with salty foods everywhere, these genes can lead to high blood pressure. Again, a helpful adaptation turned into a problem by modern life. But the story doesn't stop at genes. It keeps going into the world of bacteria and viruses, sometimes in surprising ways. For example, some people carry a gene that lets them smell a certain chemical in urine. Asparagus eaters. You know what I'm talking about. This gene doesn't affect survival, but others do. Some genes change how you smell to mosquitoes. People with certain versions are bitten less often. In malaria-heavy places, this can make a real difference. Mosquitoes skip over some people, just because of a tiny change in body odour. And then there's the world of taste. Some people are super tasters. They can taste bitterness much more strongly than others. This comes from a gene called TAS2R38. In places where poisonous plants were a danger, this gene was useful. It kept people from eating things that might kill them. In other places, it didn't matter as much. Today, it might just mean you don't like broccoli or coffee. but the story is still written in your DNA. Let's go even deeper. Think about how your body handles height. Around the world, some populations are taller on average, some shorter. Part of that is food, health, and childhood care. But some of it is genetic, shaped by old pressures. In Central Africa, there are groups known as pygmies. The average adult height is much shorter than in nearby groups. For years, people wondered why. Was it just diet, or something else? Scientists now know it's a mix of both. In the rainforest where these groups live, smaller bodies lose less heat, need less food, and move more easily through thick jungle. Genes for shorter height got passed down, generation after generation. The pressure was steady, and the result shows up in the bodies of people today. Meanwhile, in places like the Netherlands, people have slowly gotten taller over the last 150 years. Some of that is better health and food, but genetic studies show that genes for height are slightly more common there too. Even in just a few generations, genes can shift. Now let's talk about disease resistance in a different way. Take cystic fibrosis. It's a serious disease, caused by a mutation in a single gene. People with 2 copies of the mutation get sick, but having just 1 copy might help protect against certain infections like cholera or typhoid. This is another example of a trade-off. The mutation stuck around in Europe because it gave some protection from deadly diarrhea outbreaks. In places where cholera wasn't a big threat, the gene never got common. This story is still playing out. The gene is most common in people with European ancestry. It's much rarer in Africa or East Asia. There's a similar story with Tay-Sachs disease, which is most common in people with Ashkenazi Jewish ancestry. The gene that causes Tay-Sachs, when only 1 copy is present, might have helped protect against tuberculosis, or maybe it helped fight off other diseases in crowded cities. Again, it's a trade-off. The cost is high, but the benefit was real in the past. What about our bones? In some populations, bones are more dense and strong. In others, they're lighter. This isn't random. It's shaped by diet, movement, and even sunlight. For example, people who lived in the far north, like the Inuit, have bones that are thicker in some places. This helped them handle a diet high in meat and fat and deal with cold temperatures. In other places, bones are lighter, which makes movement easier and saves energy. Even today, these differences show up in medical scans. Let's turn to the immune system again, but with a twist. Some people have a mutation that makes their bodies less likely to get HIV. It's called CCR5-delta32, and it's most common in Northern Europe. Scientists think it became more common after outbreaks of plague or smallpox. The same mutation is almost absent in Asia and Africa. This is a clear sign that old diseases left marks on the DNA of survivors. But these changes don't always spread everywhere. Sometimes, a useful gene gets stuck in one place, never reaching the rest of the world. That's because people didn't travel much for most of history. Populations were isolated. Genes stayed local. When people started moving more, the mix got richer, but some local patterns remain, even now. Here's another example: the ability to handle high-carbohydrate diets. In Japan, rice has been a staple food for thousands of years. People there have more copies of a gene called AMY1. This gene makes an enzyme in your saliva that digests starch. More copies mean better starch digestion. In populations that ate mostly meat like the Inuit, there are fewer copies. This is a direct result of what people ate, passed down through generations. It's not just about taste, it's about survival. Let's talk about vision for a second. Some groups have higher rates of nearsightedness, others have lower rates. Part of this is lifestyle. Reading and screens can make vision worse, but genes play a role too. In some parts of East Asia, nearsightedness is very common, even in children. Scientists are still trying to figure out why. They think it's a mix of genes and environment working together in ways we're only starting to understand. But the changes don't always happen over thousands of years. Sometimes they're fast. In the Netherlands, the average height of men jumped by about 8 inches in just 150 years. That's mostly from better health and food, but genetic studies show a real shift in the frequency of height-related genes. It's proof that even in modern times our bodies are still changing. Let's get a little philosophical. Every gene you carry is like a message from the past. Some are gifts, protection from a disease, a knack for digesting a certain food. Others are burdens, higher risk of illness, or just a quirk that doesn't matter anymore. The recipe is always changing. Sometimes the changes are so slow you'd never notice. Other times they appear in a single generation. Think about the Bahau divers with their large spleens, or the Tibetans with their high-altitude genes. These aren't ancient fossils. They're living examples of evolution in real time. And sometimes the change is cultural, not just biological. For example, the Maasai of East Africa drink milk every day, even as adults. That's only possible because they have the lactase gene switched on for life. But the cultural habit and the gene work together. Without the habit, the gene might have faded. Without the gene, the habit wouldn't work. Now think about diseases that have almost disappeared. Polio, for example, used to paralyze thousands every year. Vaccines changed that. But as the disease fades, the genes that helped people resist polio might become less common. There's no pressure to keep them. The same could happen with smallpox resistance genes, now that smallpox is gone, but other threats are rising. Antibiotic resistance is one. Bacteria are evolving faster than we can keep up. Some people have gene variants that help their bodies fight off resistant bacteria. These genes weren't very important before. Now they matter more. The story keeps shifting, sometimes faster than we'd like. The invisible changes aren't just about the body's hardware. They're about how genes turn on and off. This is called epigenetics. It's a fancy word, but the idea is simple. Your environment, food, stress, even how much you sleep can change which genes are active. These changes can sometimes be passed to your children, even if the DNA code doesn't change. It's like flipping switches, not changing the wiring. There's a famous study from the Netherlands. During World War II, a famine hit. Babies born during the famine grew up with higher risks of heart disease and diabetes. Their children did too. The famine changed how some genes worked, and those changes lasted for generations. This isn't exactly evolution, but it shows how quickly bodies can respond to crisis. Now scientists are studying people who live unusually long lives. In some parts of Italy or Japan, people often live past 100. Researchers look at their genes. Some have rare variants that protect against heart disease or cancer. Others have genes that help the body handle stress better. But it's not just genes. Diet, daily habits, even social connections matter. The magic is in the mix. So, what does all this mean? It means that your body is a living record of the past. Every cell is shaped by survival, by challenge, by luck. Most of the changes are quiet. They don't make you a superhero, but they might help you get through the next challenge, whatever it is. We don't get to choose our genes, but we do get to learn from their stories, and sometimes the most important changes are the ones we never see. In some corners of the world, these experiments have been running even longer. Populations cut off from the rest, living in isolation, carrying their own unique changes. That's where the story gets even more interesting. If you want to see evolution in action, you don't always have to look at dramatic changes across continents. Sometimes, the best place to look is on an island, a real one, cut off from everyone else, or maybe a genetic island, a group that didn't mix much with outsiders. These places turn people into living experiments. They get their own unique stories, their own twists on what it means to survive, and sometimes the results are surprising. Let's start with a tiny spot on the map, the island of Pingalap in the Pacific. You might never have heard of it. It's a small place, home to just a few hundred people. But here's the thing, on Pingalap, colour blindness is almost normal. About 10% of the people can't see colour at all. That's 1 in 10. For comparison, in most places only 1 in 30,000 people has this kind of colour blindness. Why? It all started with a disaster. In the late 1700s, a huge storm hit Pingalap. Most of the island's people died. Only about 20 survived. Among them was a man who carried a rare gene for total colour blindness. When the survivors rebuilt their lives, there weren't many options for choosing partners. Over the next generations, that colour blindness gene spread quickly. People married their cousins, their neighbours. There just weren't many choices. Today the island is famous for this one trait. The world changed for them, but the gene stayed. It's a living example of how isolation can make something rare become common. But the story isn't just about colour blindness. It's about how small groups can end up with traits you almost never see anywhere else. On another Pacific island, Tristan da Cunha, there's a much higher rate of asthma than in most places. Same idea. A small group, cut off for generations, a few people with a rare gene, and suddenly it's everywhere. In Iceland, there are stories of rare diseases appearing again and again in certain families. Because the population was isolated for so long, it's like genetic luck. Sometimes good, sometimes bad, gets locked in. Now, let's look at something a little different. The Amish in the United States. The Amish are famous for keeping to themselves. They live simply. They don't mix much with the outside world. Because of this, they're almost like an island, even though they're surrounded by modern life. Geneticists have studied the Amish for decades. They found some rare conditions like Ellis van Creveld syndrome, which causes extra fingers and short stature. It's much more common among the Amish than anywhere else. Why? The community started with a small group of founders. The traits those people carried, good or bad, became much more common over time. It's called the founder effect. When a new population starts from a few people, their genes shape the group in big ways. But isolation can also protect a group. Here's an example: the Bahau people of Southeast Asia. They're often called sea nomads. For hundreds of years, they've lived off the coast, travelling from island to island. They spend hours diving underwater to hunt and gather food. Scientists studied their bodies and found something wild. The Bahau have much larger spleens than their neighbours. Why does that matter? The spleen stores oxygen-rich blood. When they dive, the spleen squeezes extra blood into their system. This lets the Bahau stay underwater longer, sometimes up to 13 minutes. That's not normal. It's a real, physical change, passed down through families. The Bahau are a living experiment in what happens when a group faces the same challenge, day after day, for centuries. And then there's the Sherpa people in Nepal. They live high in the Himalayas, in places where the air is thin and cold. The Sherpa are famous for their ability to climb mountains without getting sick from lack of oxygen. But here's the twist. Not all mountain people are the same. The Sherpa have their own unique mix of genes. They get more oxygen out of every breath. Their bodies don't make extra red blood cells, which helps them avoid dangerous blood thickening. This is different from what scientists see in Andean or Ethiopian mountain groups. It's a reminder that even when groups face the same problem, like thin air, they can come up with different solutions. Let's leave the mountains and head to the coast of Greenland. Here, the Inuit people have lived in freezing conditions for thousands of years. Their diet is different from almost anywhere else. Lots of fish, seal and whale. Very little sugar or plants. Scientists wondered, how do the Inuit handle all that fat? It turns out they have gene variants that help them process omega-3 fats more efficiently. These genes keep their cholesterol and blood sugar in balance, even with a diet that would cause problems for most people. The twist? If someone with Inuit genes switches to a Western diet, lots of bread, sugar, and processed food, they can run into health trouble fast. The body is tuned for one world, but the world keeps changing. Now think about the Sardinians. Sardinia is a large island in the Mediterranean. It's famous for its high number of people who live past 100. Scientists love to study them, hoping to find the secret to long life. The answer isn't simple. Some of it is diet. Lots of beans, olive oil, and fresh vegetables. Some of it is lifestyle. Walking everywhere. Lots of social ties. But the Sardinians also have unique gene patterns, shaped by centuries of isolation. Certain gene variants that protect against heart disease and some cancers are more common there than in most of Europe. It's another example of a population experiment, running quietly for generations. And then there's the Laron people in Ecuador. This small group has a rare condition, Laron syndrome, that makes them much shorter than average. But here's the twist. People with this gene almost never get cancer or diabetes. Scientists think it's because their bodies don't respond much to growth hormone. It's a strange kind of protection. The mutation is rare everywhere else, but it's common in this one group because of isolation and a shared set of ancestors. Doctors are studying the Laron people, hoping to unlock secrets that could help millions. Sometimes these isolated groups give scientists clues about diseases that affect everyone. In Finland, for example, there's something called the Finnish disease heritage. It's a set of rare genetic conditions that show up much more often in Finland than anywhere else. Why? For a long time, Finland was cut off from the rest of Europe. The population started small and grew slowly. Some rare genes became common, just by chance. Doctors there have become experts at treating these diseases, and their research has helped people all over the world. But isolation doesn't only create rare diseases, sometimes it keeps dangerous ones away. Take the example of the remote Andaman Islands in the Indian Ocean. Some islanders have never been exposed to common diseases like measles or the flu. When outsiders bring these viruses, the results can be deadly because the local immune systems aren't ready. It's a harsh reminder that being cut off can be a double-edged sword. You might avoid some problems, but you're also less prepared for new ones. Now, let's talk about something different. Resistance to specific diseases in small groups. The Roma people, often called gypsies, moved from India into Europe about 1,000 years ago. Over centuries they faced harsh conditions and discrimination. Many lived in tight-knit communities, often marrying within the group. Over time, certain genes became common. Some of these genes protect against tuberculosis, which was a killer in crowded European cities. Others increase the risk of some rare blood conditions. Again, the mix is unique, a reflection of a long, difficult journey. You can see similar patterns in Ashkenazi Jewish populations. For centuries, many lived in small communities with little mixing. Some rare genetic diseases like Tay-Sachs and Gaucher's are more common here, but so are gene variants that help fight off diseases like tuberculosis. It's another story of isolation, survival and trade-offs. Let's turn to the Faroe Islands, north of Scotland. The people there have high rates of a rare eye disease called retinitis pigmentosa. It can cause blindness. The disease is almost unheard of elsewhere, but on the Faroes, it's part of family history. Again, it's the founder effect. A few ancestors carried the gene, and now it's woven into the population. Sometimes, the experiment isn't about disease, but about how bodies handle the environment. In Papua New Guinea, highland groups have gene variants that help fight off malaria. But lowland groups, living just a few miles away, don't have these genes. The difference comes from isolation. Mountains, rivers, and thick forests keep groups apart. Each one faces its own set of challenges, and the solutions show up in their DNA. In Australia, Aboriginal groups have some of the most ancient genetic lineages in the world. Some groups lived in complete isolation for tens of thousands of years. Their genes carry clues about how humans adapted to deserts, to tropical forests, and to everything in between. Some gene variants help with kidney function, important for surviving with little water. Others affect how the body handles certain foods or fights off infections. Each group is like its own storybook. Let's look at the Basques. They live in a small region between Spain and France. The Basques have a language that's unrelated to any other in Europe. Their genes are also unique. Certain blood types like Rh negative are more common among Basques than anywhere else. Scientists have argued for years about why this is. Some think the Basques are the descendants of Europe's earliest farmers or even older hunter-gatherers. Their isolation kept those old gene patterns alive. These genetic islands teach us something simple. When people are cut off, by mountains, water, language or culture, the gene pool starts to drift. Rare traits can become common. Useful ones might get locked in. Sometimes harmful ones do too. It's chance mixed with survival. But what happens when isolation ends? When ships, planes or roads connect these islands to the rest of the world? The mix changes fast. New genes flow in. Old patterns fade. Sometimes a rare disease becomes less common as outsiders marry into the group. Sometimes a group loses its unique protection against a local disease, and people get sick more easily. Here's an example: the Sativ Hawaiians. For hundreds of years they were cut off from the outside world. When Europeans arrived, new diseases swept through. Smallpox, measles, and influenza killed huge numbers. The people had no genetic defense against these illnesses. The story is tragic, but it shows how quickly the environment can flip, turning strengths into weaknesses. Now, let's talk about the flip side. What happens when a helpful gene spreads beyond its home? The sickle cell gene is famous for this. It's common in parts of Africa, the Middle East, and India because it helps protect against malaria. But when people with this gene move to places without malaria, the protection isn't needed anymore. Instead, the risk of sickle cell disease goes up. The gene is a lifesaver in one place, a danger in another. Modern travel and migration are mixing genes faster than ever. Old genetic islands are disappearing. New blends are forming. Scientists call this admixture. The results can be hard to predict. Sometimes people gain new protections. Sometimes new risks appear. It's all one big experiment running in real time. But here's what gets me. Every single body, even in the most isolated group, carries the story of millions of years. Some chapters are written in big, obvious ways, like tall bodies or dark skin. Others are tiny, hidden in how you process salt, fight off a virus, or even see the world in colour. Isolation just makes the story easier to read. It's tempting to think of evolution as something slow and steady, but sometimes it moves in leaps, sudden shifts, strange twists and surprises nobody could have guessed. Isolation speeds things up, amplifies luck and locks in oddities. When people mix again, the deck gets reshuffled. Some cards get lost, others get passed around the world. So, what does this all mean for us now? Most of us aren't living on islands. We're part of a global mix. But the lessons from these isolated groups still matter. They show how fast things can change, how a single storm, a single shipwreck, or a single family can shape the future of a whole population. They remind us that survival isn't just about the strongest or the smartest. Sometimes it's about being in the right place at the right time, carrying the right mix of genes, or just getting lucky. And in a world where travel and technology connect everyone, the next chapter of our evolution won't look like the last. Old experiments are ending, new ones are starting, The story isn't finished, it's just taking a new turn. But if you zoom out, you see the same rule everywhere. Isolation makes experiments. Connection mixes them up. The only constant is change. And whether you live on a tiny island, deep in a mountain valley, or in a crowded city, your body carries the marks of both. What was kept, what was lost, and what might come next. But that raises a bigger question. The world is changing faster than ever. Old pressures are gone, new ones are rising. If isolation shaped so many of these experiments, what's shaping us now? And how will the next wave of change choose who thrives and who just gets by? If you zoom out and look at human life today, it's clear we're not living on islands anymore. Not really. Airplanes cross the globe in hours. The internet connects even tiny towns to the whole world. People move, mix, and marry across continents. It seems like the old rules, the ones that shaped isolated groups, don't apply as much now. But here's the twist. New pressures are taking over. They're not always easy to spot. Some are really obvious, like pollution, new diseases, and changing diets. Others are hidden, buried in the way we live, work, and even think. Let's talk about something simple first. Food. In the past, most people ate what grew nearby. If you lived in the mountains, you ate mountain food. If you lived by the sea, you ate fish. Now you can eat a pineapple in Alaska or a burger in India. Supermarkets are full of food from all over the world. Fast food chains are everywhere. It sounds great, but there's a catch. The human body is built to handle slow changes, not quick ones. For tens of thousands of years, people ate simple things. Grains, roots, meat, some fruit, maybe a bit of honey. Suddenly, in just the last 100 years, sugar and processed food exploded into our diets. And here's what happened. Rates of diabetes, heart disease, and obesity shot up. In places like the United States, more than a third of adults are considered obese. Diabetes used to be rare. Now it affects over 400 million people worldwide. Even places that once had no word for obesity are facing this new reality. The genes that once helped people survive famine by storing fat and using calories carefully are now a problem. The environment changed faster than our bodies could keep up, but it's not just about food. Think about how much we move, or really how little. For most of human history, being active was normal. Walking miles a day, hunting, farming, carrying water. Now many people spend hours sitting at desks and cars on couches. Our bones and muscles evolved for a world where movement was life. Now we try to get steps in with a phone app. The shift is huge. And it's not just about getting out of shape. Sitting too much changes how our bodies work at a deep level. It affects blood flow, hormone balance, and even how genes are turned on and off. Here's another pressure: light. For almost all of history, night was dark. Sure, there were fires and lamps, but nothing like the glow we live in now. Streetlights, screens, city lights. Night isn't really night anymore. Studies show that blue light from phones and computers messes with our sleep cycles. It confuses our brains, making it harder to fall asleep or wake up feeling rested. Poor sleep isn't just about feeling tired. It's linked to all sorts of health problems, weight gain, depression, even memory loss. Our ancient bodies aren't used to this much artificial light. We're still wired for sunrise and sunset. Stress is another big one. Not the kind of stress from running from a wild animal, but a slow, constant kind. Deadlines, bills, news alerts buzzing every few minutes, social media arguments. The body's stress system evolved to handle quick, dangerous moments. Heart rate goes up, muscles tense, you get ready to fight or run. But now stress drips in all day, every day. It's like the alarm bell never shuts off. Over time, this wears us down. It raises blood pressure, messes with digestion, and weakens the immune system. Some scientists even think that chronic stress changes which genes get switched on or off, a process called epigenetics. It's not a mutation in the DNA itself, but how the DNA is used. Then there's pollution. Air, water, soil, all are affected. We breathe in tiny particles from cars and factories. Microplastics end up in drinking water and food. Heavy metals like lead or mercury can build up in our bodies. These things weren't a problem for our ancestors. The body has ways to deal with some toxins, but the scale is new. There's growing evidence that pollution can change how genes work, or even cause mutations. Some people might be more resistant to certain chemicals just by luck. Others might be more sensitive. Over time, these differences could matter more and more. Let's talk about diseases. Not the old battles with malaria or smallpox, but new kinds. HIV appeared in the 20th century and changed lives all over the world. The coronavirus pandemic is still fresh in everyone's mind. When a new disease spreads quickly, some people get sicker than others. Part of this is luck, part is age or health, but part is genetic. Scientists are trying to figure out which genes make someone more likely to get very sick or more likely to recover quickly. In the future, this could shape which gene variants are more common in the population, and then there's medicine itself. For most of history, if you got a deadly disease, you either survived or you didn't. Now, antibiotics, vaccines, and surgeries save lives every day. Babies born with conditions that would have been fatal 100 years ago can grow up and have children of their own. People who need glasses, insulin, or heart surgery can live long lives. This changes the rules of survival. In a way, medicine is changing evolution's game. Traits that once would have disappeared from the gene pool are sticking around. But there's a new twist. Technology that lets us edit genes directly. CRISPR is the big name here. It's a tool that lets scientists cut and paste parts of DNA, almost like editing words in a document. In 2018, a Chinese scientist claimed to have created the first gene-edited babies. The news shocked the world. The idea is simple. If you can edit out a gene that causes disease, why not do it? But it opens the door to all sorts of questions. Who decides what to change? What if a change has side effects nobody expected? We're stepping into territory where evolution isn't just random anymore. Humans could start making choices about which traits get passed on. And this isn't science fiction. Genetic testing is already common. You can spit in a tube, mail it off, and find out where your ancestors came from, or if you carry certain disease risks. Some companies offer designer baby services, picking an embryo with the best genes, or at least without certain diseases. The technology is moving faster than the rules. In some countries, you can pay to select for height, eye colour, or even intelligence, though that last one is much more complicated than it sounds. We're not just watching evolution happen anymore. Some people are trying to guide it. Let's pull back and look at another big pressure: urban life. Over half the world now lives in cities. That's a huge shift from even a century ago. Cities are crowded, noisy, and full of strangers. The body's old stress systems can get overwhelmed. Social ties are different. Sometimes you know your neighbours, sometimes you don't. Air is often dirtier. Disease spreads faster. But cities also offer new chances. People meet, mix, and share ideas. New cultures are born. This mixing can break down old genetic patterns. Over time, city life could push for new kinds of adaptation, maybe resistance to pollution, or better ways to handle noise and stress. Another pressure that's often overlooked is the way we choose partners. In the past, people mostly married within their group. Same village, same language, same background. Now, online dating means you can meet someone from halfway around the world. The pool is bigger, and the choices are different. Some traits that were rare in one place can spread quickly in another. As people from different backgrounds mix, new combinations appear. Over time, this could mean new gene patterns and even new adaptations. Technology itself is a pressure. Glasses, hearing aids, wheelchairs and pacemakers all help people live full lives, even with challenges that would have been deadly before. But there's more. Think about how much we rely on tools, phones, GPS, calculators. Some scientists wonder if we're using parts of our brains less because technology does the work for us. Will this shape the brains of future humans? It's too early to say, but the way we interact with the world is changing fast, and our bodies and minds are trying to keep up. And then there's the question of fertility. In some places, birth rates are dropping fast. Countries like Japan, South Korea, and Italy have fewer children every year. This isn't just about culture or money. There are hints that chemicals in the environment, like pesticides and plastics, may be lowering fertility in both men and women. Sperm counts have dropped sharply in the last 50 years in many countries. If this keeps going, it could shape which genes are passed on. Some people might be naturally more resistant to these chemicals, or better able to have children in tough conditions. Let's talk about aging. People are living longer than ever. In 1900, the average life expectancy was about 31 years worldwide. Now it's over 70. Medicine, clean water, and better food all help. But living longer brings new challenges. Diseases like Alzheimer's and cancer are more common simply because people reach old age. Some scientists are searching for longevity genes, variants that help people stay healthy into their 90s or even hundreds. If these genes make a big difference, they could spread, especially if people with them have children later in life. But not all pressures are physical. Culture shapes us too. For example, the value placed on education, or how much time we spend looking at screens, or even how we talk and think. These things don't change our DNA directly, but they can shape which people succeed, have families, and pass on their genes. A world that rewards certain skills, like reading, memory, or social intelligence, could slowly shape who has the most children. Now let's look at climate change. The world is getting hotter. Weather is less predictable. Some places are running out of water. Others face floods, fires, or storms. Humans will have to adjust, just like our ancestors did to ice ages or droughts. Some traits might help people survive in a hotter world, like better tolerance for heat, or ability to live on less water. We don't know yet which genes will matter most, but the pressure is building. Migration is another huge force. People are moving, sometimes by choice, sometimes because they have to. Refugees leave war zones, farmers leave dried-up fields, families look for work. When people move, they bring their genes with them. New mixes happen. Old diseases meet new hosts. Sometimes this can cause problems, like when a population has no resistance to a local bug. Other times, it can bring unexpected strengths. Let's not forget the microbiome, the trillions of bacteria living inside us. In the past, people ate different foods, lived with animals, and spent time outside. Now, antibiotics, processed food, and clean water have changed the mix of bacteria in our guts. Some scientists think this could be linked to allergies, asthma, and even mental health. Our bodies aren't just human, they're part microbe. Changes in that tiny world can have big effects. But here's what really stands out. The new pressures aren't happening in isolation. They pile up. Someone might live in a city, eat processed food, sit for hours a day, breathe polluted air, sleep with their phone by the bed, and rarely see natural darkness. All these things work together in ways we're just starting to understand. The old story, one group, one challenge, one solution, doesn't fit anymore. And yet change is still happening. Evolution doesn't stop just because we have smartphones and supermarkets. It just looks different now. Instead of a single gene spreading in a tiny village, there are hundreds of small shifts happening in billions of people at once. Some changes are random, others are pushed by new pressures like disease, pollution, or even the search for love in a digital world. Some scientists call this soft selection. It's not about one group surviving and another disappearing. It's about little advantages adding up over time. Maybe someone is a little more resistant to a virus, or a little better at handling stress, or has a gut bacteria mix that helps them avoid allergies. In a world as big and connected as ours, these small edges can matter a lot. We're also seeing something new: feedback loops. Our choices, what we eat, how we move, who we meet, change our bodies. Our bodies in turn shape what we can do, and technology is speeding everything up. We invent new things, those things change our lives, and our lives push us in new directions. It's a cycle that never really ends. And there's one last thing to consider. For the first time in history, humans might get to choose parts of our own evolution, not just through medicine or food, but by editing genes, choosing partners from anywhere, or moving across the world. The line between chance and choice is getting blurry. So next time you hear someone say evolution is over, remember this: the pressures are just different now. The story keeps moving. Old experiments ended, but new ones started the moment the world changed. We're all part of this new experiment, whether we realize it or not, and for the first time we might take control of our own evolution. So what does all this mean for the humans of the future? If you look at everything happening now, the food, the stress, the technology, the mixing of people, it's easy to feel like the future is a big question mark. But there are some real theories about where things might be heading. Let's break them down, piece by piece, with simple words and simple ideas. Let's start with something obvious: size and shape. You might have heard people joke that future humans will all have hunched backs from staring at screens, or big thumbs from texting. But could these things actually matter over time? Some scientists think small changes could add up. If people spend their whole lives sitting, hunched over devices, maybe bodies will adapt. Muscles could get weaker, bones might get thinner, spines might curve differently. But remember, evolution is slow. Just because something is common now doesn't mean it'll show up in our DNA right away. Most of these changes would take hundreds, maybe thousands of years to really show up. Unless, of course, we start editing genes directly, more on that in a bit. Then there's the question of brain power. Will people get smarter, or will we get more dependent on devices? Some people worry that using GPS, calculators, and search engines might make our brains lazier. But brains are good at adapting. If we don't need to memorize phone numbers anymore, maybe we use those brain cells for something else. Maybe pattern recognition, or social skills, or creativity. It's hard to say which skills will matter most in the future, but here's a twist. The way brains change isn't just genetic, it's shaped by what we do every day. Reading, solving puzzles, learning new things, all these can rewire the brain. So even if the DNA doesn't change much, the software might keep updating. Now let's look at disease. You might think modern medicine means we've beaten evolution, but new diseases keep popping up. Viruses mutate. Antibiotic resistance is growing. Some doctors worry that superbugs could become a bigger problem. If that happens, people with certain immune system quirks might have a better shot at surviving. Over time, their kids could inherit those helpful traits. But it's not just about fighting off germs. Allergies, asthma, and autoimmune problems are all on the rise. Some scientists think this is because our bodies don't get enough practice fighting real threats. The hygiene hypothesis says that living too clean, without dirt, pets, or germs, can make the immune system bored. When that happens, it sometimes attacks harmless things like pollen or food. So the future might reward people with immune systems that are less jumpy or better at telling friend from foe. But what about the really big stuff? The things that could make future humans look, think, or even act differently from us? Here's where things get wild. First, let's talk about gene editing. In the past, evolution worked by chance. Mutations happened, and the ones that helped people survive got passed on, but now we have the tools to make changes on purpose. With CRISPR and other methods, scientists can tweak DNA in embryos, plants, even adults. In theory, you could erase a disease, boost intelligence, or even change someone's appearance. Most countries have strict rules about this, but the technology is getting cheaper and easier. Some people worry about designer babies, children whose genes are picked to avoid disease, or to be taller, or have a certain eye colour. The question is, where do you draw the line? Fixing a deadly disease seems good, but what about changing personality, or memory, or picking for things like musical talent? The future could be a mix of chance and choice, with some people edited and others not. That could create new kinds of differences, maybe even new kinds of inequality. Then there's artificial intelligence. Not just the kind that helps pick music or answer questions, but AI that might one day be part of our minds. Some people are already using brain-computer interfaces, tiny chips that help them move robotic arms or talk to computers. Right now, it's mostly for people with disabilities. But what if, in the future, healthy people start using this tech? Imagine remembering everything you ever read, or learning a new language overnight. If tech like this becomes normal, it could change what it means to be human. Would it be evolution, or something else entirely? Would those with access to these upgrades have an edge? Or would it make life harder, with new risks and problems we can't predict? Here's another angle: space. For most of human history, we've only lived on Earth. But now, people are talking about settling Mars or building bases on the Moon. Space is different. No air, less gravity, more radiation. Bodies react in strange ways. Astronauts lose bone and muscle. Their eyes change shape. Their immune systems get weaker. If people stay in space long enough, they might adapt in ways that separate them from Earth dwellers. Maybe future space humans will be shorter, lighter, with stronger hearts, or better ways to handle radiation. Some scientists even suggest editing genes to help people survive in space. Imagine a future where humans split into different groups, some on Earth, some in space, each changing in their own way. Now, let's talk about mixing. In the past, groups were often cut off from each other. Now, people move and mix more than ever. This can break down old patterns and create new ones. Over time, the average person might look less like their ancestors and more like a blend of many backgrounds. Some traits that used to be rare could become common. Others might fade away. This mixing can also help with disease resistance. When two groups with different strengths have children, those kids might inherit the best of both worlds. But it can also bring new challenges. Sometimes, mixing two gene pools can lead to health problems if both parents carry a rare gene for the same disease. Scientists are still learning how all this plays out. Social change is another big driver. The world is changing fast, and so are ideas about family, love, and gender. More people are choosing not to have children. Some want big families, others none at all. These choices shape which genes get passed on. For example, if people who are more social or more curious tend to have more children, those traits might spread. If people who are more anxious or shy have fewer kids, those traits might fade. This isn't just about DNA, it's about how the world rewards or punishes certain ways of being. Over time, the ideal human might look different, depending on what society values most. climate change will also play a huge role. As the planet heats up, some places will become harder to live in. Others might become more welcoming. People may need to adapt to heat, drought, or new diseases. Skin colour, sweat glands, even the way kidneys handle water could all change over time. In places where sunlight is strong, darker skin can protect against sunburn and cancer. In cold, cloudy places, lighter skin helps make vitamin D. If millions of people move from one kind of climate to another, the traits that help in those places might shift too. It's like a giant experiment, with billions of people as the test subjects, and technology keeps adding new layers. Think about wearable health trackers, or apps that monitor your sleep, heart rate, or even mood. Some people are already using these tools to spot problems early, or change habits for better health. In the future, tech might give people constant feedback on what to eat, how to move, or when to rest. Over time, this could shape behaviour, and maybe even which traits get passed on. If people with certain genes respond better to feedback, they might be healthier, have more kids, and spread those genes. Let's not forget the microbiome. You're not just human, you're a whole ecosystem full of bacteria, viruses, and fungi. These tiny passengers help digest food, fight disease, and even shape mood. In the past, people got microbes from dirt, food, animals, and each other. Now, antibiotics, processed food, and clean water have changed the mix. Some scientists think this could play a role in allergies, mental health, and even weight. In the future, people might edit their microbes on purpose, using special diets, pills, or even transplants. If this catches on, the line between human and microbe gets even blurrier, but here's where it gets really interesting. Some changes happen quietly, almost invisibly. They're not about big physical shifts, but tiny tweaks in how the body works. For example, there's something called epigenetics. It's the way life experiences, like stress, diet, or even trauma, can change how genes are used without changing the DNA itself. These changes can sometimes get passed on to children, or even grandchildren. It means that what happens in your life could shape the bodies and minds of people who haven't been born yet. It's not just nature or nurture, it's both, tangled together. So, what might future humans be like? It's hard to say for sure, but let's imagine a few possibilities. Maybe people will be taller, with slimmer bodies, because of better food and healthcare. Or maybe they'll be shorter and stockier, built for city life and less movement. Skin colours could blend, or new shades could appear as people mix and move. Eyes might get better at staring at screens or worse at seeing far away. Hands might get used to small movements, typing, swiping, tapping. Or maybe none of these things will matter because tech will take over. Brains could become more wired for multitasking or better at handling distraction. Maybe patience will become rare because everything is instant. Or maybe people will value focus and deep thinking even more as a way to stand out. Emotions could shift too. If life gets more stressful, people who can stay calm might have an edge. If teamwork becomes more important, social skills could become the new superpower. And what about the big leap, merging with machines? Some people dream of uploading their minds or living forever as digital beings. That's still science fiction for now. But if it ever happens, the line between human and machine could disappear. Would that be evolution, or just a new kind of existence? Nobody knows, but the idea is out there, waiting. It's also possible that change will slow down. With medicine, technology, and global mixing, some scientists think evolution could pause in some ways. If almost everyone survives and has the chance to have children, the old pressures might not matter as much. But with new challenges, climate, disease, social shifts, there will always be something pushing us to adapt. There's another theory worth mentioning: directed evolution. This means humans take charge, not just with gene editing, but by planning out whole generations, picking traits, testing combinations, maybe even creating new abilities. It sounds wild, but it's already happening in small ways. Some parents pick embryos with certain genes. Some companies talk about genetic upgrades. If this becomes normal, the future could look very different, maybe even split between groups who choose change and those who don't. But here's what really matters. The story of human evolution isn't over. It never really ends. Change is built into who we are. Sometimes it's slow, sometimes it's fast, sometimes we notice, sometimes we don't, but the pressures are always there, pushing, pulling, shaping us in ways big and small. The hardest part is that we don't get to know the ending. We can guess, we can imagine, but the future is always a little bit out of reach. Maybe that's a good thing. It keeps us humble. It reminds us that we're part of something bigger, a story that started long before us and will keep going long after we're gone. So if you ever wonder what future humans will look like or how they'll live, remember this. Every generation is an experiment. The world changes, people change, and the story keeps going. The only thing we can be sure of is that nothing ever stays the same. The future will surprise us just like the past did. Now let's return to where we started. The ocean, the darkness, the breath. Picture the first humans looking up at the stars. No phones, no cities, just darkness all around, broken only by firelight and the distant shimmer of the Milky Way. They didn't know what those lights were. Maybe they saw them as eyes or campfires of the spirits. Maybe they made up stories just like we do. But they wondered, the same way we wonder now. Humans have always tried to find meaning in what we can't explain. Think about how much has changed since then. We've learned to talk to each other across oceans. We've built cities with towers so tall they touch the clouds. We've sent machines, and even people, out into space. But if you strip it all away, there's still something very old at the core. Curiosity, the drive to survive, the need to belong. These things have shaped us for as long as anyone can remember. Here's something to consider. Every time you breathe, you're part of a story that goes back millions of years. The air in your lungs is the same air ancient people breathed. The salt in your tears matches the salt in the sea. Even your heartbeat follows a rhythm older than any song. Evolution isn't just about big changes you can see. It's about tiny shifts year after year that stack up until everything's different. Now let's zoom out. Imagine Earth from space. You see oceans, continents, swirling clouds. You can't see the people, but you know we're down there. Moving, growing, changing, each one living a life shaped by genes, family, luck, and the world around. Them. Some are in cities that never sleep. Others live where nights are still as dark as they were long ago. All of us are experiments, even if we don't feel that way day to day. What's strange is that most of the time, change sneaks up on us. You don't notice yourself growing taller. You don't feel your bones getting stronger or weaker. You don't see your immune system learning from every cold. But all the small things add up. That's how evolution works. Quietly, relentlessly, whether we're paying attention or not. There's a calm kind of wonder in that. It means you don't have to do anything special to be part of this story. Just being alive is enough. You're proof that the past works, that people survived, adapted, and kept going all the way to you. The world has thrown disasters, diseases, and ice ages at our ancestors. Still, here we are. Sometimes people think evolution is over, that we're finished products, but that's not true. Every day, new pressures shape us. Some are easy to spot, like new foods, different weather, or new medicines. Others are hidden, buried in the way we live and love. Maybe you've never thought about how city lights could change the way we sleep, or how air conditioning might affect how bodies handle heat. But these details matter. They nudge us in directions we can't always see. And just like the old stories, new questions keep popping up. Will people lose their wisdom teeth since we don't really need them? Could our sense of smell fade as more of life moves online? Will future humans still cry at the same old stories, or will new ones take their place? Some answers will take centuries to show up, others might never be clear. There's another layer too. The choices we make now shape what comes after us. If we value kindness, maybe people get better at empathy. If we prize speed and efficiency, maybe patience fades away. If we make life safer for everyone, maybe some old traits fade out. But there's always a twist. Sometimes what looks helpful in one generation doesn't work so well in the next. Nature doesn't have a plan. It's not trying to make us perfect. It just keeps testing new options. Some stick around. Others disappear without a trace. It's a little like a giant blind artist, always sculpting, never satisfied. Humans are part of that artwork. Unfinished, always changing, never quite the same from one moment to the next. When you look at the ocean at night, you see waves always moving. They rise, fall, break, and sweep away. No two are exactly alike, but together they make something bigger, a pattern older than memory. Human evolution works the same way. Each person is a single wave, but all together we make up the sea. That's why it's hard to predict the future. There are too many moving parts. Maybe some traits will fade away, like webbed toes or tails did long ago. Maybe new abilities will appear, ones we can't even imagine yet. Maybe a tiny change in one gene will spark a whole new way of life. The real lesson is that nothing stands still. Even when things seem quiet, change is happening. Bodies adapt, minds shift. Cultures blend and twist into new forms, and sometimes the biggest changes are the ones no one notices at first. It's also worth remembering that every generation faces its own challenges. There were times when it seemed like the world was ending, floods, plagues, wars. But each time people found a way through. They passed on their strength, their hope, their clever ideas. Sometimes they passed on weaknesses too. But that's part of the deal. We inherit the good and the bad, the strong and the fragile. So, what does it mean to be human right now, in this moment? It means carrying all those stories inside you. It means being shaped by the past, but also shaping the future, even in small ways. Every laugh, every risk, every new idea is a thread in this giant web. And when you lie down to sleep, you join a ritual as old as our species. Sleep isn't just rest. It's a time when bodies heal, brains sort memories, and maybe, just maybe, new ideas are born. The same darkness that scared ancient people now wraps us in comfort. The stars haven't gone anywhere. They're still there, waiting for someone to look up and wonder. If you ever feel small or lost or unsure about where you fit in, think about this. You're a link in a chain that goes back farther than anyone can remember. You're made of stardust, ocean water, and DNA that survived everything the world could throw at it. The story goes on, with you in the middle. We don't know what the humans of tomorrow will look like, or what they'll dream about, but we know they'll keep changing. They'll find new problems to solve, new places to call home, new stories to tell. They'll look back at us and wonder how we lived, just like we wonder about those first stargazers. So, as you drift towards sleep, remember this. Change is a part of being alive. It's not something to fear. It's something to be curious about. The ocean keeps moving. The stars keep shining. The story goes on, and you're a part of it. Let your breath slow down. Let your thoughts drift out to sea or float up to the stars. You're safe. You're part of something ancient and wide. Whatever tomorrow brings, you'll face it with the same spirit that carried humans this far. Good night, fellow traveller. The story continues.